Brooklyn, the late 1930s. A boy lies awake in a small apartment, turning a question over in his mind that most adults never bother to ask. He has been told there are other dimensions. He cannot picture them, and the not being able to picture them refuses to let him sleep. That boy was Carl Sagan, and decades later, in front of a camera that would carry his voice into millions of living rooms, he would do something that no science communicator before him had quite managed. He would take the human imagination by the hand and walk it gently and rigorously off the edge of the third dimension. The demonstration came near the end of Cosmos, the 13-part series he wrote with Ann Druyan and Steven Soder and filmed between 1978 and 1980. By then, Sagan had already shown audiences the surface of Mars, the storms of Jupiter, the death of stars. But the Tesseract sequence was different. It asked nothing of telescopes or spacecraft. It asked only that you think. And it rested on a quiet, radical premise, that a fourth spatial dimension was not mysticism, not science fiction, but geometry, and that an ordinary person, given the right ladder of reasoning, could climb toward it. Here is the trap most people fall into, and Sagan knew it. They hear the phrase fourth dimension, and they reach for the supernatural. They imagine ghosts, seances, hidden spirit worlds pressing against our own. The 19th century was full of this. Mediums and mystics seized on the new geometry of higher dimensional space and dressed it in candlelight and table wrapping. Sagan despised that move. He spent his life drawing a line that he refused to let blur. Wonder is not credulity. The universe being stranger than you imagine does not give you license to imagine anything you like. The fourth dimension was astonishing precisely because it was real mathematics, not because it was a doorway for the dead. So he did not start with the answer. He started lower. He picked up a flat shape, an apple in some tellings, a coin in others, and he began with a world you could understand completely. Imagine, he said, a universe with only two dimensions. Length and width, no up, a perfectly flat plane, and on it, flat creatures who have never conceived of height because height is not a word their world contains. This was not Sagan's invention. He was borrowing, openly and gratefully, from a small Victorian book published in 1884 by a London schoolmaster named Edwin Abbott, a strange and brilliant satire called Flatland. Sagan loved that book. He used it because it did the one thing he believed teaching must do. It did not hand you a fact. It built you a staircase. Watch what happens, he said, when a three-dimensional being intrudes on Flatland. Take an apple and lower it through the flat plane. The two-dimensional creatures cannot see the apple. They have no concept that lets them see it. What they witness instead is a circle that appears from nowhere, swells, shrinks, and vanishes. The full, round, glorious apple is there the entire time. They simply lack the dimension required to perceive it. To them, a complete and ordinary object looks like a miracle, an apparition, a thing that violates the laws of their reality. And it violates nothing. It is just bigger than their imagination. This is the moment the demonstration turns, and you should feel the floor tilt under you, because Sagan meant for you to. If a flat creature cannot picture a sphere, what exactly are you? A three-dimensional creature, failing to picture right now. He had you. He had walked you up one step so that you could feel the height of the next. The honest answer is that you cannot fully picture a four-dimensional object, and neither could Sagan, and neither can any physicist alive. But here is the distinction he hammered home, the one that separated him from every mystic who ever exploited this idea. Not being able to picture something is not the same as not being able to understand it. Imagination has limits. Reason does not stop where imagination does. So he gave you the reasoning, and he gave it as a ladder of shadows. Take a point and move it, and you draw a line. Move the line at right angles to itself, and you sweep out a square. Move the square at right angles to itself into the third dimension, and you build a cube. Each step is the same step. Each step multiplies the corners and pushes the shape into one more direction. And then he asked the question the whole sequence had been climbing toward. What if you took the cube and moved it at right angles to all three of its dimensions at once? You would generate a hypercube, a tesseract, a cube of cubes. You cannot do that motion in the world you live in. There is no fourth direction available to your hands. But you can do something almost as good, and this was the heart of Sagan's gift as a teacher. A three-dimensional object lit correctly casts a two-dimensional shadow. So a four-dimensional object would cast a three-dimensional shadow. And a three-dimensional shadow is something we can build and hold and turn. On screen, the model appeared. A small cube nested inside a larger cube, the corners of the two joined by struts, the whole framework beginning to rotate. It seemed to turn itself inside out, the inner cube swelling to become the outer collapsing inward, in a motion that looked impossible because part of it was happening in a direction the screen could not show. That was the Tesseract's shadow, not the thing itself. The thing itself lived somewhere your eyes were never built to follow. But the shadow was enough to prove the thing was coherent, lawful, and real as an idea. Notice what Sagan had just done to you. He had taken a concept that sounds like the property of cranks and prophets, and without ever once lowering the rigor, he had made you, personally, feel its logic in your own mind. You did not take it on faith. You climbed it, and that was the entire philosophy of his life compressed into a few minutes of television. He believed fiercely that the cosmos was not the private estate of experts. He believed that the average person, the bus driver, the school teacher, the kid in a Brooklyn apartment, possessed a mind fully capable of grasping the deepest structure of reality, if only someone respected them enough to build the staircase instead of just announcing the view from the top. Popularization to Sagan was not dilution. It was the opposite. It was the refusal to let understanding be hoarded. And there was a second lesson folded inside the first, quieter but heavier. The Tesseract sequence was a lesson in humility. Sagan was telling you, with that rotating shadow, that your perception is not the measure of what exists. The flat creatures were certain their world was complete. They were wrong, not because they were stupid, but because they mistook the limits of their senses for the limits of reality. He wanted you to carry that home. He wanted you to remember, the next time you felt absolutely sure, the next time something seemed obviously true because it fit neatly inside the picture in your head, that there may be a whole dimension your picture simply does not contain. Certainty is not truth. The cube was always inside the apple's reach. The flat creatures just couldn't see it. You feel the weight of this now more than the audiences of 1980 could have. You live in an age that has perfected the flat creature's mistake. You scroll through a feed engineered to show you only the circle, never the sphere, only the slice of the world that fits the dimension you already inhabit, the opinion you already hold, the tribe you already belong to. Algorithms reward the comfortable shadow and bury the difficult solid. And so people grow more certain even as they grow less informed, mistaking the smallness of their feed for the shape of the whole. Sagan's Tesseract was a warning written before the disease had a name. He was begging you to remember that the appearance of completeness is the most dangerous illusion of all, and that the cure was not cynicism but a particular, demanding kind of open-mindedness, open enough to consider the higher dimension, disciplined enough to demand the geometry. That, in the end, is why a man who had stood on the data from Mariner and Viking, who had spoken to humanity about billions of stars, chose to spend precious minutes of his masterpiece on a children's book from 1884 and a wireframe model of a shape no one can see. The Tesseract was never really about the fourth dimension. It was about the third dimension, about you and the apartment of your own mind, and whether you would mistake its walls for the edge of the universe. Sagan handed you a shadow and told you, in effect, that it was cast by something real, something larger, something you were capable of reasoning your way toward even if you could never quite lay eyes on it. He spent his life insisting that the human mind, properly respected and properly disciplined, could reach further than the human eye. The question he left you with is not whether the Tesseract exists. The question is how many other apples are passing through your flat little world right now, complete and ordinary and unimagined, while you stare at the circle and call it the whole.